My dear soul, come and sit with me for a moment. Let us leave behind the noise of the world, the endless chatter of minds that do not understand you, the weight of words that have wounded you, the presence of those who have drained your spirit and left you questioning your own worth. You have carried so much, have you not? You have walked through days wondering why certain people seem to exist only to disturb your peace, why some relationships feel like storms that never cease, why the very ones you trusted became the sources of your deepest pain. I see you, my friend. I see the exhaustion in your heart, the confusion in your thoughts, the silent question that rises again and again. How do I handle these people? How do I protect my peace without losing my compassion? How do I remain good in a world where goodness is so often exploited? These questions are not new. They are as ancient as the human heart itself, and they were asked long before you and I ever walked this earth. They were asked on a battlefield, under a sky heavy with the dust of approaching war, by a warrior whose soul was torn between love and duty, between the people he cherished and the truth he had to uphold. That warrior was Arjuna, and his teacher was none other than Krishna, the eternal friend, the supreme guide, the one who sees beyond the veils of illusion and speaks directly to the soul. And in that sacred conversation, recorded for all time in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna revealed truths that pierce through every confusion, every wound, every question you have ever asked about the toxic people in your life. You see, Arjuna stood on the battlefield of Kurukshetra, not facing strangers, not facing distant enemies, but facing his own family, his own teachers, his own elders, people he had loved, people who had shaped him, people whose presence in his life once brought meaning and connection. And yet, these were the very ones who had chosen the path of adharma, who had embraced greed and jealousy and cruelty, who had humiliated the innocent, who had plotted destruction, who had become so consumed by their own darkness that they could no longer see the light in others. Arjuna looked upon them and his heart broke. His hands trembled, his bow slipped from his fingers, and he turned to Krishna with tears in his eyes, asking how he could possibly raise his weapon against those he once called his own. Does this not sound familiar, my dear one? Have you not stood in your own Kurukshetra, facing people who were once close to you, people who were supposed to love you, people who instead became the source of your greatest trials? Perhaps it was a family member whose words cut deeper than any blade. Perhaps it was a friend who betrayed your trust when you needed them most. Perhaps it was a colleague who smiled to your face while working against you in the shadows. Perhaps it was a partner who claimed to love you while slowly diminishing your spirit. These are the toxic people of your battlefield, and like Arjuna, you have felt the weight of confusion, the paralysis of not knowing what to do, the fear of becoming something you do not want to be if you choose to protect yourself. But here is the first truth that Krishna revealed, and it is a truth that must settle deep into your being before we go any further. The battlefield is not outside you. The real war is within. The toxic people in your life are not the ultimate enemy. They are mirrors, teachers, and tests that reveal what still needs healing within your own soul. This does not mean you excuse their behavior. This does not mean you accept abuse or cruelty as your destiny. No, my friend, Krishna never taught passive acceptance of adharma. He taught Arjuna to fight, to stand firm, to uphold righteousness even when it was painful. But he also taught that the fight must come from a place of inner clarity, not from reaction, not from hatred, not from the desperate need to prove yourself right. You see, when we encounter toxic people, something happens within us. Their words trigger old wounds. Their actions awaken fears we thought we had buried. Their presence stirs emotions that feel overwhelming, uncontrollable, consuming. And in those moments we lose ourselves. We become reactive. We say things we regret. We match their energy with our own darkness, or we collapse inward, silencing our truth, abandoning our boundaries, becoming smaller and smaller until we no longer recognize who we are. Both responses come from the same place: identification with the mind, attachment to the ego, forgetting the eternal truth of who we really are. Krishna's teaching begins here, at the foundation of all wisdom. You are not this body. You are not this mind. You are not the emotions that rise and fall like waves upon the ocean. You are the Atman, the eternal soul, unchanging, indestructible, beyond the reach of any word or action that another being could ever direct toward you. When someone speaks harshly to you, they are speaking to the body, to the personality, to the temporary form you have taken in this lifetime. But the real you, the you that exists beyond time and space, the you that was never born and will never die, remains untouched, pure, radiant, free. This is not a philosophical concept to be debated. This is a lived truth to be realized, and it is the first key to handling every toxic person you will ever encounter. When you know who you truly are, the words of others lose their power. When you are anchored in the Atman, the storms of the world cannot shake you. This does not mean you become cold or indifferent. It means you respond from a place of centered awareness rather than scattered reactivity. It means you see clearly, act wisely, and protect your peace without losing your compassion. And this, my dear soul, is exactly what Krishna taught Arjuna as the chariots stood ready and the conch shells prepared to sound the beginning of war. Let us go deeper now, for understanding alone is not enough. You may hear these words and nod in agreement, yet when you return to your life, when you face that person who knows exactly how to unravel you, when their voice reaches your ears or their message appears before your eyes, all this wisdom may seem to dissolve like morning mist. This is because knowledge that remains in the mind has not yet become wisdom that lives in the heart. And Krishna, in his infinite compassion, did not simply tell Arjuna what to think. He transformed how Arjuna perceived reality itself. Consider what happens when a toxic person enters your awareness. Before they even speak, before they act, something within you tightens. Your breath becomes shallow. Your thoughts begin to race, anticipating conflict, rehearsing defenses, reliving past hurts. This is the mind caught in its patterns, trapped in what the Gita calls the play of the gunas, the fundamental qualities of nature that color every experience. When you are in the grip of rajas, you become agitated, reactive, driven by the need to fight or prove yourself. When tamas takes hold, you feel heavy, defeated, wanting only to withdraw and disappear. But when sattva rises, when clarity and peace become your foundation, you see the situation as it truly is, not through the distorted lens of fear or anger. The toxic person before you is also caught in this play of the gunas. They are not acting from their highest self. They are identified with their ego, driven by their own wounds, their own fears, their own unfulfilled desires. When someone criticizes you harshly, they are often projecting their own inner critic. When someone tries to control you, they are usually terrified of their own lack of control. When someone betrays you, they have first betrayed themselves, abandoning their own integrity in pursuit of something they believe will fill the emptiness within them. This understanding does not excuse their behavior, but it does free you from taking it personally. Their actions reveal who they are, not who you are. Their words reflect their inner state, not your worth. Krishna spoke to Arjuna about the nature of the senses and how they pull the mind outward, toward objects, toward people, toward situations that promise pleasure or threaten pain. He said that just as a tortoise withdraws its limbs into its shell, so the wise one withdraws the senses from their objects and finds peace within. This is not about shutting yourself off from life. It is about not allowing external circumstances to dictate your internal state. When a toxic person speaks, you can hear their words without being consumed by them. You can witness their behavior without being swept away by reaction. You become like the deep ocean, whose surface may be disturbed by passing storms, but whose depths remain calm and undisturbed. This is the practice of detachment, and it is perhaps the most misunderstood teaching of the Gita. Detachment does not mean you stop caring. It does not mean you become heartless or indifferent to the suffering of others, or even to your own pain. True detachment is the release of compulsive identification. It is the ability to experience life fully while remaining rooted in the awareness that you are not defined by any experience. You can love someone deeply and still be detached from the outcome of that love. You can work toward a goal with full commitment and still be detached from whether you achieve it. You can face a toxic person with clarity and compassion and still be detached from their opinion of you. This is the freedom Krishna offered Arjuna, and it is the same freedom available to you in this very moment. But freedom requires practice. It requires the willingness to observe yourself, to notice when you are being pulled into old patterns, to choose a different response even when every fiber of your conditioned mind wants to react in the familiar way. In the beginning, this feels difficult, even impossible. You will fail many times. You will lose your center and find yourself caught in the drama once again. But each time you return to awareness, each time you remember who you truly are, you strengthen the muscle of consciousness. You build the inner resilience that no external force can ever take from you. There is another layer to this teaching that we must explore together. Krishna did not tell Arjuna to simply endure the wrongdoing of others in silence. He did not say that the path of righteousness is to accept abuse without response. No, my dear friend, the Gita is not a teaching of passive submission. It is a teaching of righteous action, of dharma, of standing firm in truth, even when the world around you has abandoned it. The question is not whether you should respond to toxic people, but how you should respond, from what place within yourself, with what intention, toward what end. When Arjuna wanted to drop his bow and walk away from the battle, Krishna did not praise his compassion. He called it weakness disguised as virtue. He saw that Arjuna was not acting from genuine peace, but from confusion, from attachment, from the fear of facing the painful consequences of doing what was right. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is to establish a firm boundary. Sometimes protecting yourself is not selfishness, but sacred duty. Sometimes walking away from a toxic relationship is not abandonment, but the highest act of self-respect. And sometimes, yes, sometimes you must stand and face the conflict directly, not with hatred in your heart, but with the calm clarity of one who knows their dharma and refuses to abandon it. The key is to act without attachment to the fruits of action. This is the essence of karma yoga, the path of selfless action that Krishna revealed as one of the highest spiritual practices. You do what is right because it is right, not because you expect a certain outcome. You speak your truth because truth must be spoken, not because you need the other person to agree or apologize or change. You establish your boundaries because your peace is sacred, not because you are trying to punish or control anyone else. When you act from this place, you are free. The toxic person may respond with more toxicity. They may escalate their behavior. They may never understand or acknowledge the harm they have caused. But none of this touches you because your action was complete in itself. You did your part. You upheld your dharma. The rest is not in your hands. Let me tell you something that may surprise you, something that the world rarely speaks of because it requires a depth of honesty that most are unwilling to reach. The toxic people in your life did not arrive by accident. They are not random misfortunes cast upon you by an uncaring universe. They are part of your journey, woven into the fabric of your karma, placed upon your path for reasons that your mind may not yet comprehend, but your soul already knows. This is not a punishment. This is not proof that you are cursed or unworthy of peace. This is the sacred design of a universe that loves you too much to let you remain asleep, that cares for your awakening so deeply that it will use every circumstance, every relationship, every wound to bring you closer to the truth of who you are. Krishna understood this when he spoke to Arjuna on that ancient battlefield. He saw that the enemies before Arjuna were not merely opponents to be defeated, but instruments of divine will, teachers in the disguise of adversaries, catalysts for a transformation that could not have occurred in comfort and ease. The Kauravas, with all their cruelty and corruption, served a purpose in the grand unfolding of Dharma. Their very existence created the conditions for the Gita to be spoken, for the highest wisdom to descend into human consciousness, for a teaching that would illuminate countless souls across thousands of years to emerge from the dust of that battlefield. And so it is with the toxic people in your life. They are part of something larger than your personal story, something that your limited perspective cannot fully grasp, but your heart can sense if you become still enough to listen. This does not mean you should seek out suffering or remain in situations that destroy you. The wisdom of the Gita is not masochism dressed in spiritual clothing, but it does mean that when you look back upon your life, when you trace the threads of your growth and awakening, you will often find that your greatest teachers wore the masks of your greatest challenges. The parent who wounded you forced you to develop a strength you never knew you possessed. The friend who betrayed you taught you to trust yourself more deeply than you ever trusted another. The partner who diminished you eventually led you to discover a self-worth that no external validation could ever provide. This is the alchemy of consciousness, the mysterious process by which suffering becomes wisdom, wounds become openings, and the very people who sought to break you become the unwitting servants of your liberation. But here is where discernment becomes essential, my dear soul. Understanding the deeper purpose of your trials does not mean remaining in them indefinitely. A lesson, once learned, does not need to be repeated endlessly. A teacher, once their teaching is complete, does not need to remain in your life forever. Krishna taught Arjuna to fight, to take action, to move through the challenge rather than being paralyzed by it. There comes a moment when understanding must give way to decision, when reflection must yield to movement, when the soul that has seen clearly must now act in alignment with that seeing. And for many of you, that moment is now. The toxic person in your life has taught you what they came to teach. The question is whether you have the courage to graduate from their classroom. This brings us to one of the most practical and yet most profound aspects of Krishna's teaching, the nature of boundaries. In the modern world, we speak often of boundaries, of the importance of protecting our energy, of not allowing others to cross lines that should be sacred. And yet, so many struggle to implement what they understand. They know they should distance themselves from certain people. They know they should speak up when they are mistreated. They know they should stop tolerating behavior that erodes their peace. But when the moment comes, something within them hesitates. Old patterns rise up. Fear whispers its familiar warnings. Guilt wraps its heavy arms around the heart. And once again, they find themselves sacrificing their well-being on the altar of someone else's dysfunction. Why does this happen? Why is it so difficult to protect ourselves from those who harm us? Krishna's teaching illuminates this mystery with piercing clarity. It is because we are attached. We are attached to the relationship, to the idea of who we want the other person to be, to the hope that things will change, to the fear of what we might lose if we let go. Attachment is the root of all suffering, the Gita tells us, and nowhere is this more evident than in our relationships with toxic people. We cling to them not because they bring us joy, but because we are afraid of the emptiness we imagine we will feel without them. We tolerate their behavior not because we are weak, but because we have not yet realized that our wholeness does not depend on their presence. Consider this carefully, for it is a truth that can set you free if you allow it to penetrate beyond the surface of your mind. The toxic person in your life cannot give you what you are truly seeking. No matter how much they change, no matter how much they apologize, no matter how much they promise to be different, they cannot fill the void within you that only your own awakening can fill. You are looking to them for love, but the love you seek is already within you, waiting to be discovered. You are looking to them for validation, but your worth was established by the divine long before any human opinion was formed. You are looking to them for security, but true security comes only from the unshakable knowledge of your own eternal nature. When you realize this, truly realize it in the depths of your being, the grip of attachment begins to loosen. You can still love them, but you love them freely, without need. You can still wish them well, but your well-being no longer depends on their choices. This is the state that Krishna describes as sthita prajna, the one of steady wisdom, the one whose mind is not disturbed by sorrow, nor elated by joy, who has gone beyond fear and anger and attachment to rest in the eternal peace of the self. This is not an impossible ideal reserved for ancient sages in Himalayan caves. This is your birthright, the natural state of your being when the clouds of confusion are cleared away. And every encounter with a toxic person, every moment of pain they bring, every challenge they present, is an opportunity to move closer to this state, to practice the teachings, to choose awareness over reaction, to remember who you truly are when everything around you seems designed to make you forget. But let us be honest with each other, you and I. The path is not easy. There will be moments when the pain feels unbearable, when the injustice seems too great, when every cell of your being cries out for retaliation or collapse. In those moments, remember Arjuna. Remember that even the greatest warrior, even the closest friend of the divine, experienced doubt and despair. Remember that Krishna did not judge him for his weakness, but met him with compassion and truth. And remember that the teaching was not given all at once, but unfolded gradually, layer by layer, as Arjuna's heart became ready to receive it. Your journey is the same. You will not master these teachings overnight. You will stumble and fall and rise again. But with each rising, you become stronger. With each return to awareness, the light within you grows brighter. And slowly, imperceptibly at first, the toxic people in your life begin to lose their power over you, not because they have changed, but because you have. There is a teaching within the Gita that speaks directly to the heart of what we are exploring, a teaching that Krishna offered when Arjuna asked him how to recognize one who has attained wisdom, one who has found that unshakable peace that remains steady through all the storms of life. Krishna's answer was not about rituals or practices or external achievements. He spoke instead of an inner quality, a way of being in the world that transcends circumstances. He said that such a person is the same in pleasure and pain, in gain and loss, in victory and defeat. They are not elated when praised, nor dejected when criticized. They do not cling to what is pleasant, nor flee from what is unpleasant. They have found their center, and from that center they engage with life fully, freely, without the chains of compulsive reaction. When you hear these words, perhaps a part of you dismisses them as impossible, as a standard too high for ordinary human beings to reach. But I invite you to consider that this is not about becoming something you are not. It is about removing what you are not to reveal what you have always been. The agitation you feel when a toxic person attacks you is not your true nature. It is a layer of conditioning, a pattern learned through years of experience, a habit of the mind that mistakes itself for the self. Beneath that agitation, beneath the fear and the anger and the hurt, there is something that remains untouched, something that has witnessed every experience of your life without ever being damaged by any of it. This is the Atman, the eternal self, the spark of the divine that Krishna revealed to Arjuna as his true identity. Understanding this intellectually is one thing. Living it is another. And this is where the practical wisdom of the Gita becomes so precious, for Krishna did not leave Arjuna with abstract philosophy alone. He gave him tools, methods, ways of approaching the challenges before him that could transform understanding into embodied realization. One of the most powerful of these tools is the practice of witnessing, of stepping back from the drama of experience to observe it from a place of stillness. When a toxic person speaks harsh words to you, there is the experience of those words, the sound, the meaning, the emotional impact. And then there is the one who experiences the awareness that knows the words are being spoken, that feels the emotions arising, that watches the thoughts forming in response. This awareness is not disturbed by what it witnesses. It cannot be hurt by words because it is not made of the same substance as words. It cannot be diminished by criticism because it has no image of itself to protect. This is not a technique to be practiced only in meditation. This is a way of living, a continuous remembrance of who you truly are even in the midst of the most challenging encounters. When you are in the presence of someone who triggers your deepest wounds, you can practice this witnessing. You can notice the tightness in your chest without becoming identified with it. You can observe the thoughts racing through your mind without believing every one of them. You can feel the urge to react, to defend, to attack, without automatically acting on that urge. In that space between stimulus and response, in that sacred pause where awareness shines, you have the freedom to choose. And in that choice lies your power, a power that no toxic person can ever take from you because it does not depend on their behavior. But there is something deeper still, something that Krishna revealed to Arjuna in the most intimate moments of their dialogue, something that goes beyond even the practice of witnessing to the very source of peace itself. This is the teaching of surrender, of offering every action, every thought, every experience to the divine. Krishna said to Arjuna that whatever he does, whatever he eats, whatever he offers, whatever he gives, whatever austerity he practices, he should do it as an offering to the Supreme. This is not about religious ritual or blind devotion. It is about transforming the very quality of your engagement with life. When you offer your experiences to something greater than your personal ego, they cease to be burdens you must carry alone. The pain inflicted by toxic people becomes an offering. The challenge of maintaining your peace becomes an offering. Even your failures, your moments of reaction, your times of forgetting, all of these become offerings in the great fire of transformation. This surrender is not weakness. It is the ultimate strength. It is the recognition that you are not the doer, that the same consciousness that moves the stars and grows the forests and beats your heart is also navigating the challenges of your relationships. You are an instrument, a channel through which the divine expresses itself in the world of form. When you align yourself with this truth, when you let go of the illusion that you must figure everything out with your limited mind, something miraculous happens. Guidance comes, clarity emerges. The right words appear when they are needed. The right actions become obvious. And you find yourself navigating situations that once seemed impossible with a grace that surprises even yourself. Krishna told Arjuna that he should not grieve for those who are not worth grieving for, and yet the wise grieve for neither the living nor the dead. This statement puzzled Arjuna, as it may puzzle you now. How can we not grieve when we are hurt? How can we not feel sorrow when those we trusted betray us, when those we loved reveal themselves as incapable of love? The answer lies in understanding what grief truly is. Grief is the mind's resistance to what is. It is the insistence that reality should be different from how it appears. When you grieve the behavior of a toxic person, you are grieving the gap between who they are and who you wanted them to be. You are mourning an illusion, an image you held in your mind that never corresponded to the actual person before you. When you release this illusion, when you accept that this person is exactly who they have shown themselves to be, the grief begins to dissolve. This is not cynicism or resignation. It is clarity. It is seeing what is rather than what you wish were true. And from this clear seeing, you can make decisions that serve your highest good. You can love the person for who they actually are, with all their limitations and wounds, without expecting them to be someone they are not. Or you can recognize that who they actually are is not someone you can have in your life, and you can release them with compassion rather than resentment. Either way, you are free. Either way, you have moved beyond the suffering that comes from fighting reality. Let us pause here for a moment, my dear soul, and breathe into a truth that perhaps you have sensed, but not yet fully articulated. The toxic person in your life is not merely an obstacle to your peace. They are a mirror, reflecting back to you the parts of yourself that still require healing, the wounds that remain open beneath the surface of your conscious awareness, the beliefs about yourself that you absorbed long ago and have carried ever since, like invisible chains. This is difficult to accept because it feels like blame, like you are being told that their cruelty is somehow your fault. But that is not what this teaching means. Their behavior is their responsibility, the fruit of their own karma, the expression of their own unhealed pain. And yet, your reaction to their behavior, the particular way their words pierce you, the specific patterns that arise within you when you are in their presence, these reveal something precious about your own inner landscape. Krishna understood this deeply. He knew that Arjuna's hesitation on the battlefield was not simply about the enemies before him, but about something unresolved within Arjuna himself. The doubts, the fears, the attachment to outcome, these were Arjuna's inner demons, and they had to be faced before the outer battle could be fought with clarity. The Kauravas were merely the external form through which Arjuna's internal struggle became visible. And so it is with you. The toxic person who wounds you is showing you where you are still vulnerable, where your sense of self still depends on external validation, where you have not yet established yourself in the unshakable ground of your own being. This is not a curse, but a gift, a painful gift, yes, but a gift nonetheless. When someone criticizes you and you feel devastated, ask yourself why their opinion has such power over you. Is it because somewhere within you you believe what they are saying? Is it because your sense of worth is still anchored in how others perceive you rather than in your direct knowledge of your own nature? When someone abandons you and you feel destroyed, ask yourself what you were seeking from their presence that you have not yet learned to give yourself. Is it love? Is it safety? Is it the feeling that you matter? These are not weaknesses to be ashamed of. They are simply areas where your growth is inviting you to go deeper, where the universe is asking you to become more whole, more complete, more established in the truth of who you are. This is the inner work that toxic relationships demand of us, not just the outer work of setting boundaries and making difficult decisions, but the inner work of examining our own attachments, our own fears, our own unconscious patterns that keep drawing us into dynamics that do not serve our highest good. Krishna told Arjuna that the mind is restless, turbulent, obstinate, and very strong, and that controlling it is more difficult than controlling the wind. But he also said that it is possible through practice and dispassion to bring the mind to stillness, to train it to rest in awareness, rather than being swept away by every thought and emotion that arises. This training is not separate from your relationships. Your relationships are the training ground. Every encounter with a toxic person is an opportunity to practice, to notice when you are being pulled into reactivity, to pause, to breathe, to choose a response that comes from your deepest wisdom rather than your oldest wounds. There is a concept in the Gita that is essential to understand as we explore this territory, and that is the concept of the three gunas, the three qualities of nature that influence all of manifest existence. These are sattva, the quality of clarity, harmony, and light; rajas, the quality of activity, passion, and restlessness; and tamas, the quality of inertia, darkness, and confusion. Every thought you think, every emotion you feel, every action you take is colored by one or more of these qualities. And the people in your life, including the toxic ones, are also expressions of these gunas in various combinations. When you understand this, something shifts in how you perceive the toxic person. You begin to see that their cruelty is not a personal attack against you, but an expression of the gunas operating through them. They are caught in rajas, driven by ambition and aggression, unable to rest in peace. Or they are caught in tamas, sunk in ignorance and negativity, unable to see the light. Their behavior is the natural consequence of these qualities dominating their consciousness. This does not excuse their actions. Actions have consequences, and harmful behavior creates harmful karma regardless of its source. But it does allow you to see them with a degree of compassion that would be impossible if you took their behavior personally. And here is the deeper teaching. You too are subject to the gunas. When you react to a toxic person with anger, you are being moved by rajas. When you sink into depression after an encounter with them, you are being pulled into tamas. The goal is not to eliminate these qualities, for they are part of the fabric of existence, but to cultivate sattva, to increase the clarity and harmony within yourself so that you can navigate the challenges of life with wisdom rather than being tossed about by every shift in your emotional weather. This cultivation happens through the choices you make every day, the food you eat, the thoughts you entertain, the company you keep, the practices you engage in. All of these influence the balance of the gunas within you. And as sattva increases, you find that the toxic people in your life affect you less and less. Not because they have changed, but because you have become established in a quality of being that is naturally resistant to their influence. But let us go even deeper, my friend, for there is a level of understanding that transcends even the gunas, a perspective from which the entire drama of toxic relationships is seen in a completely different light. Krishna revealed to Arjuna his cosmic form, the Vishvarupa, the vision of the entire universe contained within the divine. In that vision, Arjuna saw creation and destruction, birth and death, all the beings of all the worlds arising and dissolving in the infinite body of the Supreme. He saw that everything, without exception, was an expression of the divine, that there was nothing outside of this cosmic wholeness, that even the enemies he was about to fight were part of this grand tapestry. When you begin to glimpse this vision, even faintly, your relationship to toxic people is transformed at its root. You see that they too are expressions of the divine, however distorted, however lost in illusion. You see that the same consciousness that looks out through your eyes looks out through theirs, that the same life force that animates your body animates theirs, that beneath all the layers of conditioning and karma and pain, there is a spark of the eternal that is identical in both of you. This does not mean you condone their behavior or remain in harmful situations, but it does mean that you can release the hatred, the desire for revenge, the fantasy of their punishment. These feelings, while understandable, only poison your own heart. They keep you bound to the very person you are trying to be free from. There is a moment in every soul's journey when the teachings cease to be words and become living truth, when the philosophy descends from the mind into the heart and takes root there as direct knowing. This is the moment Krishna was guiding Arjuna toward throughout their dialogue, and it is the moment that awaits you as you contemplate these truths in the context of your own life. For it is one thing to understand that toxic people are expressions of the gunas, that they are caught in their own karma, that they are ultimately divine beings lost in illusion. It is quite another to feel this understanding in your bones, to let it transform how you move through the world, to allow it to dissolve the knots of resentment and fear that have accumulated in your heart over years of painful encounters. The transformation we are speaking of does not happen all at once. It unfolds gradually, like the dawn that begins with the faintest lightening of the sky and slowly, imperceptibly, becomes full day. You will have moments of clarity followed by moments of forgetting. You will find yourself responding with wisdom to a toxic person and feel a surge of joy at your own growth. And then, perhaps the very next day, you will be triggered again, pulled back into old patterns, reacting from wounds you thought had healed. This is not failure. This is the path. This is how the journey unfolds for every sincere seeker. Krishna did not promise Arjuna instant liberation. He promised that through steady practice, through unwavering commitment to the truth, through the gradual purification of the heart, liberation would come. And it will come for you as well, my dear soul, if you persist. Consider for a moment the nature of the toxic person's power over you. Where does this power actually reside? When they speak cruel words, where is the cruelty located? Is it in the sound waves that travel through the air? Is it in the movements of their lips and tongue? Is it in the neural firings in their brain that produce the speech? When you examine it closely, you find that the cruelty has no independent existence. It is a quality that arises in the meeting of their words and your interpretation. The same words, spoken to someone who did not understand the language, would have no impact at all. The same words, spoken to someone who had fully realized their true nature, would be like wind passing through empty space. The power of the toxic person exists only in relation to your own mind, your own beliefs, your own unhealed wounds that give their words a place to land. This is not to minimize your pain. The pain is real. The suffering is genuine. But understanding the mechanics of how this suffering arises is the first step toward freedom. If the toxic person's power depends on your interpretation, then by changing your interpretation, you change the entire dynamic. This is not positive thinking or denial. It is a fundamental shift in perception, a recognition that you are not a passive recipient of other people's energy, but an active participant in creating your experience. You have been given the power to choose what meaning you assign to events. You have been given the power to decide which thoughts you will entertain and which you will release. This power is your birthright, and no toxic person, no matter how skilled in manipulation, can take it from you unless you surrender it. Krishna spoke to Arjuna about the nature of the enlightened being, describing how such a person withdraws their senses from the objects of sense like a tortoise withdrawing its limbs into its shell. This image is profound in its simplicity. The tortoise does not fight the world. It does not struggle against threats. It simply withdraws into itself, into the safety of its own being, and from that protected space it waits for the danger to pass. You have this capacity as well. When you are in the presence of a toxic person, when their words are flying like arrows toward your heart, you can withdraw into the sanctuary of your own awareness. You can pull your attention back from the drama unfolding before you and rest in the silent witness that observes all without being touched by any of it. This withdrawal is not avoidance. It is not running away from the situation. You can be physically present, engaged in conversation, responding appropriately, while simultaneously maintaining this inner retreat. It is a matter of where your center of gravity lies. If your center of gravity is in the external situation, in the toxic person's words and actions, then you will be tossed about by every shift in their mood. But if your center of gravity is in your own being, in the awareness that you are, then you can engage with the situation from a place of stability. You become like a deep lake that remains calm in its depths, even when storms churn its surface. The waves are there, the disturbance is real, but it does not reach the stillness at the core. Let us speak now of something that often goes unaddressed in discussions of toxic relationships, and that is the grief that accompanies the recognition of who someone truly is. When you finally see a toxic person clearly, when the illusions fall away and you perceive the full extent of their capacity for harm, there is a death that occurs. It is the death of the relationship you thought you had, the death of the person you believed them to be, the death of the future you imagined together. This grief is holy. It deserves to be honored, not rushed through or suppressed. Krishna told Arjuna that the wise grieve for neither the living nor the dead, but this does not mean they do not feel. It means they do not cling. They allow the grief to move through them like weather moving through the sky, fully experiencing it without becoming identified with it, letting it complete its natural cycle and dissolve. You may need to grieve the parent who was never able to love you the way you needed. You may need to grieve the friend who betrayed your trust. You may need to grieve the partner who revealed themselves as incapable of the intimacy you longed for. This grieving is not weakness. It is the necessary passage through which you move from illusion to truth, from attachment to freedom. And on the other side of this grief, something beautiful awaits. Not bitterness, not cynicism, but a clear-eyed compassion that can love without demanding, that can give without expecting, that can be present without losing itself in the other. The Gita teaches that attachment is the root of suffering. When you are attached to a toxic person, whether through love or hate or fear, you are bound to them. Their actions control your peace. Their words determine your mood. Their presence or absence shapes your sense of self. This attachment is a chain, invisible but stronger than iron, and it must be broken if you are to be free. But how do you break a chain that has been forged over years, perhaps over lifetimes? How do you release an attachment that feels woven into the very fabric of who you are? Krishna's answer was both simple and profound. He said to fix your mind on the divine, to make the supreme your refuge, to offer all your actions as worship. This is not escapism or spiritual bypassing. It is a redirection of the energy that has been flowing toward the toxic person back toward its true source, the love you sought from them, the validation, the sense of worth. These were always meant to come from your connection to the infinite, not from any finite being. When you turn your heart toward the divine, when you seek your fulfillment in the eternal rather than the temporary, the toxic person loses their hold on you. Not because you have suppressed your needs, but because you have found a way to meet them that does not depend on anyone else's behavior. This turning toward the divine can take many forms. It may be prayer or meditation or devotional singing. It may be service to others or the study of sacred texts. It may be the simple act of pausing throughout your day to remember that you are not alone, that you are held by something greater than yourself, that the challenges you face are not punishments, but invitations to grow. Whatever form it takes, this turning is the essential movement of the spiritual life. It is the shift from seeking your completion in the world to discovering that you are already complete, that nothing can be added to what you truly are, that the fullness you have been chasing has been within you all along, waiting patiently for you to turn inward and recognize it. And yet, my dear soul, let us not pretend that this recognition is easy or that it happens once and remains forever. The mind has been trained for lifetimes to seek fulfillment outside itself. The habits of attachment are deep grooves worn into the fabric of your consciousness through countless repetitions. Even when you glimpse the truth of your own completeness, the old patterns reassert themselves. You find yourself once again seeking approval from the toxic person, once again devastated by their rejection, once again caught in the cycle you thought you had escaped. This is not failure. This is the nature of the path. The spiritual journey is not a straight line from ignorance to enlightenment. It is a spiral, circling back again and again to the same lessons, each time understanding them more deeply, each time releasing a little more of what no longer serves you. Krishna knew this about human nature. He knew that Arjuna would need to hear the same truths expressed in different ways, approached from different angles, before they would truly penetrate. And so he taught through story and metaphor, through philosophy and devotion, through the language of duty and the language of love. He met Arjuna where he was, honoring the complexity of his struggle, never dismissing his doubts or fears, but addressing them with infinite patience. This is the patience you must have with yourself as you navigate the territory of toxic relationships. You will stumble. You will forget. You will find yourself repeating patterns you swore you had outgrown. And each time this happens, you must meet yourself with the same compassion that Krishna showed Arjuna, gently guiding yourself back to the truth, never condemning yourself for being human. There is a teaching in the Gita about the nature of action that is essential to understand as we explore how to handle toxic people. Krishna distinguished between three types of action based on the guna from which they arise. Sattvic action is performed without attachment to results, with a calm and steady mind, without aversion or desire. Rajasic action is performed with ego, with craving for specific outcomes, with great effort and restlessness. Tamasic action is performed in delusion, without regard for consequences, arising from negligence and ignorance. When you examine your responses to toxic people through this lens, you gain clarity about where you are acting from and where you need to grow. When you set a boundary with a toxic person from a place of sattvic clarity, you do so without anger, without the need to punish them, without attachment to how they will respond. You simply recognize what is true and act accordingly. This is the highest form of action, and it leaves no karmic residue. But when you set the same boundary from a place of rajasic agitation, fueled by resentment and the desire to hurt them as they have hurt you, the action becomes entangled with ego. Even if the external behavior looks the same, the internal quality is different, and the consequences for your own consciousness are different. And when you fail to set boundaries at all, remaining in harmful situations out of tamasic inertia, telling yourself that things will somehow change on their own, you perpetuate the cycle of suffering through your own unconsciousness. The goal is not to judge yourself for the quality of your actions, but to become aware of it. Awareness itself is transformative. When you notice that you are about to respond to a toxic person from a place of rajas, from anger and ego, that very noticing creates a space in which you can choose differently. You can pause, breathe, and allow the reactive energy to move through you without acting on it. You can wait until the storm passes and then respond from a clearer place. This is not suppression. Suppression pushes the energy down where it festers and eventually erupts. This is transmutation. You allow the energy to be present, you witness it with compassion, and you choose not to let it drive your actions. Over time, this practice weakens the rajasic tendencies and strengthens the sattvic ones. You find yourself naturally responding with more wisdom, more calm, more clarity. But let us also acknowledge that there are moments when action must be swift and decisive, when the luxury of contemplation is not available, when the toxic person is causing immediate harm, and you must respond now. Krishna did not teach Arjuna to sit on the battlefield in endless meditation while arrows flew around him. He taught him to act, to fulfill his duty as a warrior, to engage fully with the situation before him. There is a time for withdrawal and a time for engagement, a time for patience and a time for firmness. The wisdom lies in knowing which is appropriate in each moment. And this knowing does not come from following rules or formulas. It comes from the depth of your own being, from the intuition that arises when the mind is clear and the heart is aligned with truth. When you are faced with a toxic person who is actively harming you or someone you love, you do not need to process your feelings before taking protective action. You act first, from the instinct of self-preservation, from the duty to protect the innocent, from the clear recognition that harm must be stopped. And then, afterward, when the immediate danger has passed, you can do the inner work of understanding your reactions, healing your wounds, cultivating compassion. The spiritual path does not ask you to be passive in the face of evil. It asks you to act from wisdom rather than from reaction, to be fierce when fierceness is called for, to be gentle when gentleness is needed, to be always rooted in the truth of who you are. There is something else that must be said about toxic people, something that may be difficult to hear but is essential for your freedom. Sometimes the toxic person is not an external figure at all. Sometimes the toxic person is you. Not in the sense that you are fundamentally flawed or unworthy, but in the sense that you carry within you patterns of thought and behavior that poison your own well-being and harm your relationships with others. Perhaps you criticize yourself relentlessly, speaking to yourself in ways you would never speak to someone you loved. Perhaps you sabotage your own success, undermining yourself just as you are about to achieve something meaningful. Perhaps you push away those who care for you, convinced that you do not deserve their love. These are forms of self-toxicity, and they require the same compassionate attention that you would give to any external toxic relationship. Krishna's teaching about the mind being both the friend and the enemy of the self applies here with particular force. For him who has conquered the mind is the best of friends. But for one who has failed to do so, the mind will remain the greatest enemy. The toxic voice within you, the one that tells you that you are not enough, that you will never succeed, that you deserve the pain you experience. This voice is not your true self. It is a pattern, a conditioning, a ghost from the past that continues to haunt your present. And just as you must set boundaries with external toxic people, you must set boundaries with this internal voice. You must learn to recognize when it is speaking, to question its authority, to choose not to believe everything it tells you. This inner work is perhaps the most important work of all. For no matter how skillfully you manage your external relationships, no matter how effectively you distance yourself from those who would harm you, if you carry the toxicity within yourself, you will never find peace. You will simply exchange one source of suffering for another, fleeing from external tormentors, only to find that the cruelest voice of all lives inside your own head. This is why Krishna's teaching is ultimately about inner transformation, not external management. The battlefield of Kurukshetra was a real place with real warriors and real stakes, but it was also a symbol of the inner battlefield where each soul must confront its own demons, its own doubts, its own destructive tendencies. When you begin to treat yourself with the same compassion you are learning to extend to toxic others, something remarkable happens. The energy you have been using to fight against yourself becomes available for other purposes. The creativity that was suppressed by self-criticism begins to flow. The love that was blocked by self-rejection begins to circulate through your being and naturally extends outward to others. You discover that healing your relationship with yourself is not a selfish act but a generous one. For a person who is at peace with themselves becomes a source of peace for everyone they encounter. This is the ripple effect of inner work, the way that one person's transformation touches countless others in ways that may never be fully visible. Let us return now to the question of how to actually implement these teachings in your daily encounters with toxic people. For wisdom that remains theoretical, that never descends into the practical realm of action, is incomplete wisdom. Krishna did not merely philosophize with Arjuna. He gave him specific guidance for how to act, how to hold his bow, how to face his enemies, how to fulfill his duty. And so we must also become specific, translating these eternal truths into concrete practices that you can apply in the moments when you need them most. The first practice is what we might call the pause of recognition. When you encounter a toxic person, when their words or actions begin to trigger your usual reactions, you pause. Not for a long time, perhaps just for a single breath, But in that pause, you recognize what is happening. You name it silently to yourself. This is toxicity arising. This is the gunes in motion. This is karma playing out. This recognition creates a tiny gap between stimulus and response, and in that gap lies your freedom. Without the pause, you are a puppet dancing on strings, pulled by the toxic person. With the pause, you become the observer of the dance, able to choose your next movement consciously rather than reactively. The second practice is the invocation of the witness. This is the practice of stepping back into the awareness that observes without being touched. You can do this in the midst of any interaction, no matter how charged. As the toxic person speaks, as your emotions begin to rise, you shift a portion of your attention to the witnessing presence within. You become aware of being aware. You notice your own reactions as if from a slight distance, not suppressing them, not identifying with them completely, but holding them in the spacious awareness that you are. This dual attention, present to the situation and present to the awareness that contains the situation, is the key to remaining centered in the midst of chaos. The third practice is the remembrance of truth. In the heat of a toxic encounter, it is easy to forget everything you know. The ancient survival mechanisms take over, flooding your system with stress hormones, narrowing your perception, preparing you for fight or flight. In these moments, you need a simple truth that you can remember, a touchstone that can anchor you. It might be a phrase from the Gita, such as "I am the eternal soul," untouched by these passing experiences. It might be a single word like peace or witness or truth. Whatever it is, you hold it in your mind as a counterweight to the toxic energy swirling around you. This is not denial of what is happening. It is the introduction of a higher truth into the situation, a truth that can transform your experience from within. The fourth practice is the blessing of the toxic person. This is perhaps the most difficult practice, and it is not appropriate for every situation. But when you are able to do it, it is profoundly transformative. In the midst of the encounter, or afterward when you are alone, you silently offer a blessing to the toxic person. You wish for their suffering to end. You wish for them to find the peace that would make their toxicity unnecessary. You wish for them to awaken to their own divine nature. This blessing is not for their benefit alone. It is primarily for yours. It breaks the cycle of negativity that would otherwise continue to bind you to them. It transforms the energy of resentment into the energy of compassion. It aligns you with the highest truth, which is that even the most toxic person is a child of the divine, lost in illusion, worthy of love even when their actions are not. The fifth practice is the protection of your energy. While compassion is essential, it must be balanced with discernment. You cannot pour from an empty cup, and if you allow toxic people to drain your energy completely, you will have nothing left for yourself or for those who genuinely need your help. This means learning to limit your exposure to toxic people when possible. It means not engaging in arguments that have no resolution. It means excusing yourself from conversations that are spiraling into negativity. It means, when necessary, cutting ties completely with those whose toxicity is so severe that any contact is harmful. This is not a failure of compassion. It is the recognition that your own well-being is sacred, that you have a duty to protect the instrument through which you serve the world. These practices are not magic formulas that will instantly transform your experience. They are seeds that must be planted and tended over time. You will forget to use them. You will find yourself reacting in old ways despite your best intentions. And when this happens, you simply begin again. You do not waste energy berating yourself for forgetting. You simply return to the practice again and again, with the patience of a gardener who knows that growth takes time. Each time you remember to pause, to witness, to remember truth, to bless, to protect, you strengthen the new neural pathways that will eventually become your default response. Each time you choose awareness over reaction, you weaken the old patterns that have kept you imprisoned. There is a beautiful teaching in the Gita about the nature of steady wisdom, what Krishna called sthita prajna, the one whose wisdom is firmly established. Such a person, Krishna said, is not disturbed by the appearance of happiness or distress. They have gone beyond attraction and aversion. They remain the same in honor and dishonor, in cold and heat, in pleasure and pain. This is not a description of someone who has become numb or indifferent. It is a description of someone who has found their center, who has discovered the unchanging awareness at the core of their being, who is no longer tossed about by the waves of circumstance because they have learned to rest in the ocean itself. You are moving toward this steady wisdom, my dear soul, whether you realize it or not. Every challenge you face, every toxic person you encounter, every moment of suffering that drives you deeper into the search for truth is moving you toward this destination. The path may seem long, the obstacles may seem insurmountable, but Krishna promised that no effort on this path is ever lost. Even a little practice of this dharma, he said, protects one from great fear. The steps you are taking now, the awareness you are cultivating, the practices you are implementing, these are not wasted. They are accumulating, building upon each other, preparing you for the breakthrough that will come when the time is right. And as you continue on this path, you will notice something changing in the quality of your relationships. The toxic people in your life may not change, but your relationship to them will transform utterly. Where once their words could devastate you, you will find that they pass through you like wind through an open window. Where once their rejection could send you spiraling into despair, you will find that it barely ripples the surface of your peace. This is not because you have become cold or disconnected. It is because you have found your home within yourself, and no external force can evict you from that dwelling place. The toxic person who once held such power over you will seem smaller somehow, not because they have diminished, but because you have expanded. You have grown into the vastness of your own being, and from that vantage point their toxicity appears as what it always was, the desperate flailing of a soul trapped in suffering, reaching out for something to hold on to, not realizing that what they seek cannot be grasped from outside. This shift in perception is one of the greatest gifts of the spiritual path. When you truly see the toxic person through the eyes of wisdom, you understand that their cruelty is not personal. It never was. They would treat anyone in your position the same way because their behavior arises not from who you are, but from who they are, from the unhealed wounds they carry, from the distorted beliefs that shape their perception, from the desperate strategies they have developed to survive their own inner torment. This understanding does not excuse their behavior. It does not mean you should tolerate abuse or remain in harmful situations. But it does free you from the burden of taking their toxicity personally, from the exhausting work of trying to figure out what you did wrong, from the impossible task of being good enough to earn their love or approval. Krishna taught that the wise see with equal vision a learned and humble priest, a cow, an elephant, a dog, and an outcast. This equal vision is not a flattening of differences, but a recognition of the divine presence that animates all forms. When you develop this vision, you see the toxic person not as fundamentally different from yourself, but as another expression of the one consciousness, temporarily caught in patterns that cause suffering. You see the same light shining through them that shines through you, even if their light is obscured by thicker clouds of ignorance. This seeing does not make you naive or vulnerable. It makes you wise. It allows you to respond to the toxic person with appropriate boundaries while holding them in your heart with compassion. It allows you to protect yourself without hating them, to walk away without abandoning them to your contempt. There is a profound teaching about friendship in the Gita that illuminates this point. Krishna described the characteristics of a true devotee, one who is dear to the divine. Such a person, he said, is friendly and compassionate to all beings, free from possessiveness and ego, equal in pain and pleasure, forgiving, always content, self-controlled, of firm resolve. Notice that friendliness and compassion come first, before all the other qualities. This is not accidental. The spiritual path begins and ends with love, with the recognition that all beings are interconnected, that the suffering of one is the suffering of all, that the liberation of one contributes to the liberation of all. Even your dealings with toxic people must ultimately be grounded in this love, not a sentimental love that overlooks harm, but a fierce love that sees clearly and acts wisely, a love that honors both your own sacred worth and the sacred worth of the other, even when that other is lost in darkness. As you integrate these teachings more deeply, you will find that the category of toxic people begins to dissolve, not because toxicity ceases to exist, but because you stop defining people by their worst behaviors. You begin to see the wholeness in everyone, the mixture of light and shadow, the capacity for both cruelty and kindness that exists in every human heart. The person you once labeled as toxic reveals themselves to be complex, wounded, struggling, capable of moments of surprising tenderness alongside their patterns of harm. This does not mean you should ignore the patterns or pretend they do not exist. It means you hold a larger view, one that includes the patterns without being limited to them, one that remains open to the possibility of change while not depending on it. This larger view is what Krishna was pointing to when he spoke of seeing the divine in all beings and all beings in the divine. It is a vision that transcends the dualities of good and bad, friend and enemy, toxic and healthy. It is a vision that recognizes the play of the gunas in all manifestations, understanding that what appears as toxicity in one moment may transform into something else in another moment, that nothing is fixed, that everything is in motion, that the only constant is the awareness in which all of this appears. When you rest in this awareness, you are no longer troubled by toxic people because you are no longer troubled by anything. You have found the peace that passes understanding, the peace that remains unshaken regardless of circumstances, the peace that is your birthright as a child of the infinite. But let us not rush to this ultimate vision too quickly, for there is wisdom in honoring where you are on the path. If you are still deeply wounded by toxic relationships, if you are still struggling to set boundaries, if you are still caught in patterns of reaction and suffering, then the teaching about seeing the divine in all beings may feel premature, even harmful. It may become another way of bypassing your legitimate pain, another spiritual concept used to avoid the difficult work of healing. The path is not about leaping to the highest teaching before you are ready. It is about meeting yourself where you are, doing the work that is appropriate for your current stage of development, trusting that the higher realizations will come in their own time. For now, perhaps the most important thing is simply to give yourself permission to protect yourself, permission to say no, permission to walk away, permission to prioritize your own well-being without guilt or shame, permission to be imperfect in your responses, to sometimes react rather than respond, to sometimes fall back into old patterns, permission to be human with all the messiness and struggle that implies. This permission is itself a form of self-love, a recognition that you are worthy of care and protection, that your peace matters, that your journey matters. Without this foundation of self-acceptance, all the higher teachings become just another form of self-judgment, another standard you fail to meet, another reason to feel inadequate. Krishna accepted Arjuna exactly as he was, with all his doubts and fears, with all his resistance and confusion. He did not demand that Arjuna be enlightened before he could receive the teaching. He met Arjuna in the midst of his crisis and offered guidance appropriate to that moment. This is the model for how you must treat yourself. Meet yourself in the midst of your struggle. Offer yourself guidance appropriate to this moment. Do not demand that you be further along than you are. Do not compare your journey to anyone else's. Simply take the next step, whatever that step may be, trusting that each step brings you closer to the freedom you seek. And as you take these steps, as you navigate the complex territory of toxic relationships with increasing wisdom and skill, remember that you are not alone. The same divine presence that spoke through Krishna to Arjuna speaks to you now, in the depths of your own heart, in the quiet moments of reflection, in the sudden insights that arise unbidden. This presence is always available, always guiding, always supporting your journey toward wholeness. You have only to turn your attention inward to feel its gentle presence, to hear its quiet voice, to receive its infinite love. This is the ultimate teaching about toxic people, that no matter how much harm they may cause, they cannot separate you from the source of your being. They cannot touch the divine spark within you. They cannot prevent you from awakening to who you truly are. And so we arrive at the heart of the matter, the place where all the teachings converge into a single, luminous truth. You have journeyed far, my dear soul, through the landscape of understanding, through the valleys of self-recognition and the peaks of higher wisdom. You have contemplated the nature of toxicity and seen it for what it truly is. Not a fixed quality in certain people, but a manifestation of suffering, a symptom of souls lost in the maze of their own pain. You have learned that protection and compassion are not opposites, but partners in the dance of wisdom. You have discovered that the greatest transformation happens not in the toxic other, but within yourself, in the depths of your own being where the eternal witness resides untouched by all the storms of circumstance. Now let this understanding settle into your bones, into the very marrow of your existence. Let it become not just something you know, but something you are. For knowledge that remains in the head is like a lamp hidden under a basket, useful only to itself. But knowledge that descends into the heart, that becomes embodied in your every breath and gesture, this is the knowledge that transforms, that liberates, that sets you free from the prison of reaction and suffering. Krishna did not teach Arjuna merely to inform his mind. He taught to transform his being, to awaken him to the truth of who he was, to ignite the flame of wisdom that would burn away all confusion and doubt. You are that same flame, my dear one. You are that same awareness that Krishna spoke to on the battlefield so many ages ago. The words that were spoken then are spoken now, in the eternal present where all true teaching occurs. Time has not diminished their power. Distance has not diluted their truth. They reach you now in this very moment, as fresh and potent as when they first emerged from the lips of the divine charioteer. Receive them not as ancient history, but as living guidance, as the voice of your own deepest self calling you home from the wanderings of confusion. The toxic people in your life have been your teachers, though they knew it not and you perhaps resisted the lesson. They have shown you where you still carry wounds that need healing, where you still harbor beliefs that limit your freedom, where you still depend on external validation for your sense of worth. Every pain they caused pointed to a place within you that was calling for attention, for love, for the light of awareness. This does not mean you should thank them for their cruelty or seek out more suffering as a path to growth. It means only that you can transform even the most painful experiences into fuel for your awakening, that nothing in your life has been wasted, that every encounter has served your evolution in ways you may never fully understand. As you go forward from this moment, carry with you the essence of what you have received. Carry the knowledge that you are the eternal soul, the Atman, untouched by all that happens to the body and mind. Carry the practice of witnessing, of stepping back into the awareness that observes without being consumed. Carry the understanding that toxic behavior arises from suffering and ignorance, not from any true assessment of your worth. Carry the wisdom of boundaries, of protecting your sacred energy while holding compassion in your heart. Carry the recognition that healing your relationship with yourself is the foundation upon which all other healing rests. And carry, above all, the unshakable conviction that you are worthy of peace, worthy of love, worthy of a life free from the constant drain of toxic relationships. This worthiness is not something you must earn or prove. It is your birthright as a spark of the divine, as an expression of the infinite consciousness that underlies all existence. No toxic person can take this worthiness from you because it was never given by anyone external. It is woven into the very fabric of your being, as inseparable from you as wetness is from water, as heat is from fire. When you know this, truly know it in the depths of your being, the opinions and behaviors of toxic people lose their power to define you. They become like shadows passing across the face of the sun, momentary obscurations that cannot diminish the light itself. Let this be your meditation in the days to come. When you encounter toxicity, whether from others or from the toxic voice within your own mind, return to this knowing. Return to the awareness that you are. Return to the peace that is your natural state before the mind begins its commentary. Return to the love that flows through you when you are not blocking it with fear and resentment. This return is always possible, in any moment, under any circumstances. It requires no special conditions, no perfect environment, no absence of challenge. It requires only your willingness to turn your attention inward, to seek the stillness beneath the turbulence, to remember what you have always known but temporarily forgotten. Krishna's final words to Arjuna were words of profound intimacy and trust. He told Arjuna to reflect on everything he had heard and then to do as he wished. This is the ultimate respect for free will, the recognition that even divine guidance cannot force transformation, that each soul must choose its own path. And so I offer you the same freedom. Take what resonates from these teachings and leave what does not. Trust your own inner guidance to show you what is true for you, what practices will serve your growth, what boundaries you need to set, what relationships you need to release. You have within you all the wisdom you need. These words have only been a reminder, a pointing toward what you already know in the depths of your being. Go now with the blessing of all the teachers who have walked this path before you, with the blessing of Krishna who illuminated the way for Arjuna, with the blessing of your own highest self who has been guiding you all along. Go with the knowledge that you are never alone, that the divine presence accompanies you in every step, that even in the darkest moments of dealing with toxic people, there is a light within you that cannot be extinguished. Trust this light. Follow this light. Be this light. And watch as your life transforms, not because the world has changed, but because you have awakened to who you truly are. This is the promise of the Gita. This is the fruit of the teaching. This is your destiny, waiting patiently for you to claim it. May you find the peace that surpasses understanding. May you know the love that casts out all fear. May you rest forever in the truth of your own infinite being.